A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to an evening this evening with David Pye, who's coming to us from Glastonbury. Is that correct, David?
It is indeed, yes. Well, just south of Glastonbury, in one of the villages.
Right, lovely. And David, tonight we'll be talking about reincarnation. That's always a very hot topic, very widely debated. So, yeah, we're looking forward to a very, very interesting evening with you, David. So, David, can we ask a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, by all means. I'm essentially retired. I spent 20 years as a research chemist, and after that, I moved on to IT. So really, my background is in the sciences, which is really why I was very impressed with Dr. Helen Wambach, who's the lady I'll be talking about in this presentation. She is quite an amazing lady. She's a research scientist herself. Obviously, she's a psychologist, and the work that she did was back in the 1970s, and that's what I'll be focusing on.
Wonderful. Something very, very interesting is becoming more and more apparent as these series of talks go on, not only here on the church page, but on other channels as well, is the number of what you would regard as very highly educated professionals, doctors, professors, who are really getting into the intuitive arts as we know them through mediumship, past lives, healing especially. It's really comforting, actually, that, you know, these people whose name has a lot of weight are really looking at it and looking at it properly. You know, they're going in there with an open mind and they're analysing what they see and making those deductions. But that's one of the wonderful things with spiritualism, because if we go back to the pioneer days of spiritualism in the UK, all the top spiritualists were of very, very high standing and a very high educational background, which in those days was a rarity because education wasn't available to everybody. So, yeah, it's really interesting that so many of the sciences are now looking towards what we call the esoteric fields and really investigating them, really looking at them. And they're not going away going, it's fake. I love that. I love
that. No, you're absolutely right. And it's a great change in the way science is looking at things. There's still plenty of people who are reactionaries, especially TV scientists like Brian Cox and other people who sort of poo-poo a lot of the alternatives. But, you know, things are changing. So it's great.
Indeed, and that's like any subject and any matter, isn't it? If you come in there with with your own energy of what you want to achieve by it, well, lo and behold, you probably will achieve that because you've created it. You've interfered with the experiment, if you like. You know, you've gone in with that vein of, yeah, I'm going to prove this is wrong. Who's the magician? I never remember his name. He does the fantastic stunts. And he says, locks himself in a box.
I can't think of it. Yeah, he's always on the box, isn't he? Yes.
Yeah, he puts himself in a box and flushes himself out of a plain toilet or something and appears in McDonald's.
He's doing all these tricks.
Yeah. And he says, you know, mediumship and spirituality, he said, is a big fake. There's nothing there. And I've seen him do things and I'm thinking, you know what, mate? I think actually you decry it, but on the side, there are talents there, because apart from a pure psychic force being applied, I really can't see how that worked. Anyway, people don't want to hear from me. They hear from me all the time. David, sir, over to you.
Okay, well, I'm going to share the screen because what I'd like to do is to give you a little sort of presentation. I shall talk over it because I think some of you may be looking on iPads or even mobile phones. So some of the words may be a little too small. So essentially, if I start sharing my screen. Okay, I'm just going to do that now. It takes a little while.
That's why we're doing that. Very good evening to everybody joining us. Hi. Thank you. We're just having that technical moment, ladies and gents.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Is something coming up there?
It
Yes.
is indeed.
Oh, okay. Let me there we go. Can people see that?
No, you've got it on the application window. All we're seeing is about, the windows disappearing into the distance here.
Oh, okay. I know that kind of thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Close that down.
All right, ladies and gents, we did practice this the other day.
I know. It worked perfectly last time, didn't it?
Yeah.
Clearly, it's not going to go this time. Let me try stop sharing. Right. Okay. Let's try that. Share screen. Okay. Share screen. So I've got Windows or screen to share, or select Windows or screen. What should I select? Entire screen?
Try entire screen, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's looking at. Oh no.
Oh, it's doing that thing again. What's happening?
There you go.
Can you see anything now?
Yeah. If you max, there you go. There
Is
you
that
go.
it? Have we
You
got
are.
it? Okay. Excellent. Right.
See, ladies
We're,
and gents, the work we have to go through to bring you an evening of education. David, without further ado, I shall step out of the studio and hand it over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Lawrence. Okay. Well, basically, I'll be talking about death and reincarnation, which I know is always a very interesting topic, especially when you get to my age. You're always thinking, "Ooh, how long have I got?" But essentially, probably still got a few years yet. So the truth about death and reincarnation. And essentially, what I'll be talking about is the pioneering work of Dr. Helen Wambach. And I'm also going to mention at the end Dr. Michael Newton, who some of you may have heard of. So let's get into that. So the first question one might ask is, where do you go when you die? I mean, look at this graveyard with just like hundreds and hundreds of graves. You think to yourself, what happened to those people? I mean, when the brain dies and the body dies, is that it? Are we just suddenly blacked out and no longer exist? And also, if there is something that happens after death, if there is life after death, then you may ask the question, what is the purpose in this particular life? What was it that you were supposed to do? Were there any lessons? Was there something you were supposed to happen in this life, or just live it? And also, if there is life after death, and if there is reincarnation, that means that people are going to be reborn again. And do you get any choice in that process? Did you actually choose this life? And I'm sure many of you will say, oh, no way I'd have chosen this life. It's terrible. But let's have a look at what Dr. Wambach uncovered. So here we go. This is Dr. Helen Wambach, 1925 to 1985. That's when she died, which is rather a shame, really, because she did most of her work in the 1973 onwards. She was a clinical psychologist at JFK University. And she started this group hypnotic regression program in 1973. Prior to that, she had done some direct client hypnotic regressions. This is essentially where you hypnotize somebody and you take them back to the past, back to when they were a child. And in the case of regression, you take them back beyond their birth, back to the period before their birth and back into a previous life. And that's called past life regression. And that's what Dr. Helen Wambach started off her work doing. Now, she began that research expecting hypnotic regression to be fantasy, which is a very interesting standpoint because she was a research scientist. So she began it without any sort of expectations. And she just thought to herself, well, this is probably fantasy. All these people saying, oh, I was such and such in a past life. And she actually published 2 books in 1978. The first one was called Reliving Past Lives, which is all the evidence under hypnosis. And the second one was quite interesting. That was, she looked really at the period in between lives, what actually happened in that process. So if people die and they go to heaven or spirit or whatever, what happens when they're back up a spirit? What goes on? What discussions goes on? Who do they meet? What's going on? And why do they decide to come back again to live another life, which is what reincarnation is all about? So let me explain first as to why Helen Wambach was thinking that hypnotic regression and reincarnation was fantasy. And it's a very good one. Oh, sorry, let me just go back to this. I'll go on. Before I go into that, what I'll do is I'll just have a little sort of summary of reincarnation in various religions. Let's have a look at this. So I'm going to look at Tibetan Buddhism. Now, this is the Baba Chakra. This is a symbol that often appears outside Buddhist temples. And it's essentially the wheel of life. I don't know if you can see my mouse going around, but if you just imagine the wheel, and on it are various scenes of life. And inside are all the various worlds. You've got the animal world, you've got the world of spirit world, you've got the demon world, you've got all these little worlds inside it. And up at the top there, you've got the Buddha, and the Buddha is pointing over to the left-hand side here. He's pointing to the moon. I'll explain why he's doing that in a minute. But basically, in the center of this Baba Chakra, we've got a very interesting structure. We've got this structure. We've got a pig, we've got a bird, and we've got a snake. And these represent the the basic emotions that keep you locked in the earth plane, that stop you from passing on to higher levels. So the pig represents gluttony, and the bird represents desire, and the snake represents anger. And the way to overcome the constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth is through the teachings of the Buddha. And if you follow the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, you can see the Buddha here is pointing to the moon, which represents nirvana, which represents what we're all trying to get off this constant cycle. And so that's a very sort of a potted explanation of Buddhism and the reasons for the Buddhists believe in reincarnation. So let's have a little look at Hinduism. I apologize for anyone who knows a lot more about this. I'm just going through it quite briefly. So Hinduism and the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a very famous book. It's part of the Upanishads, and it's quite famous for a whole variety of reasons. But one of the main reasons is in the middle of the Bhagavad Gita, there's this very special scene where Arjuna, this is this chap down here, has started a great war in India. It's for obviously who's going to lead India. And we've got two great armies that are just about to do this massive battle. And what happens is Arjuna has this sudden sort of epiphany type moment where he's thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be fighting this army. And on the other side are all my relatives, my uncles, and my brothers. And I'm fighting on my side of the army. I'm going to end up killing all my family. Now, conveniently, he has Krishna, the god Krishna, as his chariot driver, which is very fortunate. And essentially, Arjuna has this sudden clash of faith. He says, I cannot slay my kinsman, not for all the three worlds, much less a kingdom. And Krishna, you think, well, Krishna might be sympathetic, but what Krishna says is, he turns to Arjuna and he says, this is your hour of trial, Arjuna. Such base despair does not become you. It is inappropriate. The call to battle has already been sounded. Arise and take up your arms. So this is Krishna telling him to get on with the battle. Now, why would he do that? And Krishna explains to Arjuna that the soul in man is neither born nor can it die. Weapons cannot cut it. Fire cannot burn it. Water cannot wet it. Wind cannot dry it. What makes you think you can kill the soul? And he goes on to say, just as a man discards old clothes and wears new ones, the eternal soul sheds a dead body and enters another. So this is Krishna explaining to Arjuna about reincarnation and the fact that, okay, you've got this great battle, people are going to die, but you can't kill the soul. And what happens then, of course, is that Krishna does what he does best, which is doing this amazing vision of all his personal past incarnations. So let's have a look at Christianity. Christianity and reincarnation, they probably think, well, what's Christianity got to do with reincarnation? But if we go back to the past, and in fact, we're going back to 527, and this is the Roman Empire, which, of course, by 527, have been pushed right back to this orange area here, which is the Byzantine Empire. And they basically lost all these lands. And the Roman Empire had been pushed right back to the east, and a very powerful Christian emperor came on the throne, Justinian I, and he fought back and he regained all this yellow territory here, which had been taken over by the Goths and the Vandals. They'd taken over all this piece of land, and he fought it all, got it all back, and he was a very, very powerful character. And here's a snapshot of Justinian. Now, Justinian was a Christian despot. Now, he fiercely controlled law and religion, and he was advised by his bishops that reincarnation taught that souls came from God, because at this time, Christianity was teaching reincarnation. And what Justinian believed was that people would think if they knew they came from God, then they would be the equal of Jesus, who of course also came from God. The result being that the state and the church would not be able to control the people because they thought themselves the equal of Jesus and of God. So in 545 AD, Justinian applied all the power of Rome to stop the teaching of reincarnation. He forced the ruling cardinals and he forced the Pope, and the Pope was very resistant to this, to draft a papal decree stating that anyone teaching that souls come from God and return to God, e.g. reincarnation, would be punished. So what did this papal decree say? This is very interesting in that what the papal decree said was that souls do not come from God, but souls are created at the moment of conception, and souls only go to heaven if they follow the church's teachings. So this enabled great control over people through fear, because if they didn't follow the church, they could not be saved and damnation would result. Now, this decree that souls do not come from God, but souls are created at the moment of conception is still current today. The Catholic Church still believes this, that a soul is created at the moment of conception. And its only savior, the only place it can go after death is heaven, or if it doesn't follow the teachings of the church, it ends up going to hell. So this, again, was a great controlling feature. Now, the reason we know this is because if we look back here at Egypt, you'll all be aware of the Dead Sea Scrolls up in the top right-hand corner there by the Dead Sea. But before the Dead Sea Scrolls, in 1945, at the Egyptian site of Hagnamadi, ceramic jars were found containing leather-bound papyrus books. And it is believed that they were hidden sometime in the 4th century AD. So this is well before Justinian. And if we have a look at these books, you can see, I don't know if you can see this on your screens, but in the top right-hand corner, Gnostic Christian text of secret teachings believed to have been written before AD 180. And the reason they know that is that it's been mentioned, this book has been mentioned in lots of documentation and historical writings, but it wasn't discovered until 1945. And it describes Jesus Christ appearing and giving secret knowledge or gnosis to the Apostle John. So what did he say to John? Well, Jesus explains that human souls are recycled by Jehovah and constantly thrown into forgetfulness and prisons. Oh, excuse me a moment, just a quick drink. Now you might think that's a bit weird. Why would they say constantly thrown into forgetfulness and prisons? The prison here refers to the Gnostic term for the physical body, because the Gnostics weren't really interested in the physical body. They were interested in purifying the body, so ultimately that they could go to heaven. So they tended to refer to the physical body as a prison. But Jesus is describing here reincarnation. And John asks him how a soul can be liberated from this cycle. And Jesus goes on to say, the soul needs to follow another soul in whom the spirit of life dwells, e.g. somebody of a higher spiritual nature. Because the soul, he calls it she is saved through the spirit. And once she is saved, she will never be thrust into flesh again. And it's again this term, thrust into flesh or reincarnation. This is all about thinking of the flesh as being this prison idea. But essentially, he's talking about reincarnation and how you get off the wheel of constant birth, death, and rebirth. Now the term thrust into flesh or reincarnation has completely disappeared from the Bible. There are some verses though which do survive, where John the Baptist is claimed to be Elijah returned, and that really is pretty much the only mention of reincarnation in the Bible. Okay, right. Well, apologies to anybody who knows a lot more about that than me, but that's wanted to get that over to you as a kind of a little bit of a potted summary of the major religions and how they think about reincarnation. So back to Helen Wambach, the main topic of the of tonight's talk. So by the time of her death in 1985, she had regressed over 6,000 people. And she did this as group hypnosis, not individuals. I'll go on to explain that. So let's have a look first, though, as to why Helen believed that regression, past life regression, was probably fantasy. Let's have a look at why she thought that. And it's very interesting. There's a case in 1952, but we're going right back now. A US housewife, Virginia Tighe, she was hypnotically regressed by an amateur hypnotist, Maury Bernstein. And when she was regressed, she started talking about this past life as a lady called Bridie Murphy in Ireland. And this is back in 1798 to 1864. And this book was published, The Search for Bridie Murphy. And it was actually so famous at the time that it caused a huge furore, because as far as the American public were concerned, it was like proof of reincarnation. And there were Bridie Murphy songs produced, there's even a Bridie Murphy dance. And it was a really big thing in the 50s. And the film, which is actually available on YouTube, so if you've got an hour and a half to spare, it's quite intriguing. Basically, you can see Virginia Tighe here with the hypnotist using a candle to hypnotize into this past life. Unfortunately, what happened is that because this story got so big, the press and the media decided to really dig into it, and they went over to Ireland to check everything that Bridie Murphy had claimed, the church she was born, the place she was born, the house, the people she knew. And what happened is they did find that there were some discrepancies. The vast majority of it was correct, but there were discrepancies about the church. The church she was married in didn't exist. She called her husband Sian when obviously his name was Sean. And there's a few other discrepancies, which basically, the big discrepancy which kind of killed the story was that apparently when little Virginia was 5 years old, she lived in America. Obviously, she'd never left America. There was a lady living opposite who was an Irish immigrant, and this lady was called Bridie Murphy. Now, even though that this Bridie Murphy lady hadn't lived in 1798, she was living in the present day. What happened is the media and the scientists and everybody got onto it, and it was decided that what it was a case of cryptomnesia, which is basically meaning that this Bridie Murphy over the road had told these stories to little Virginia, and little Virginia, when she'd grown up, had remembered these stories, thinking they were her own memories, and therefore the whole case was squashed. So it was that kind of background that made Helen Wambach think that maybe, regression and reincarnation is all fantasy. So she basically decided to set up a series of scientific experiments to decide what would you expect if it was fantasy. And she came to the conclusion that if it was fantasy, you would expect people to recall famous or interesting lives. It'll all be Cleopatras or Napoleons. You'd also expect people to be upper class rather than lower class if it's fantasy. Why would you want to be slaving in the fields when you can be somebody riding a horse and have a castle? So you'd also expect, because back in the day, males had a lot more freedom than females, you would expect more male lives than female lives to be reported. You'd also expect time periods familiar to the subject. So you'd like the days of cowboys, the Wild West, or you'd expect periods that are very familiar because the subject had read books on a particular topic. And also you would expect population changes in time periods not reflected in lives reported. What this means basically is that if you look at the population of the planet Earth, it's been amazingly static for a long time. It's only about 500 million, right up till about the late 1700s, and then it starts to rise quite dramatically for a whole variety of reasons. Obviously, less wars, less diseases, the rise of antibiotics, the rise of vaccines, etc. And also, many women in the early days died in childbirth, and so with the rise of better hospital care, better nursing care, that happened less and less. So all these factors added up to make the population of the Earth shoot up. And this goes up to 2006 billion, and now we're on the way to just over 7 billion. So you'd expect that pattern to be repeated if you were doing a long time period of people's past lives. So let's have a look at what the method she used. Basically, she didn't want to regress individuals. What she wanted to do was regress several people, and she did. She regressed up to 30 subjects at a time, and basically she got people to come along on a Saturday. To fund the whole thing, I think they all paid about $20 each for a Saturday session, and they stayed there all day. They brought lunch, and they brought a blanket and a pillow, and basically she laid them all down and she took them through a hypnotic regression. And she said to them, she regressed them and she guided them to choose past life from a selection of time periods, and she did this so she had something quantifiable in terms. I'll explain that a bit more as we go on. What she did is, while people were hypnotically regressed to these past lives, and obviously not everybody went to a past life with 30 subjects, but a good half of them actually did go back to a previous life and reported it. And Helen asked them a series of questions and told them that they will remember the answers on waking and be able to complete a special answer form. This is the clever bit. She did 3 separate regressions, identical procedure for every group. So basically, if somebody had a regression early on and it was something very, very scary, she didn't want that person getting obsessed about that particular life. So she gave them 3 opportunities. And also people who didn't get anything, if they have 3 goes, at least they've had a good shot at it. And in the end, she gathered together all these special answer forms, and she analysed the results statistically herself. There's no computers. This was back in the 70s when time was very, very expensive, and she didn't need a computer for this. She just needed a lot of hard work. So the questions that were asked on the hypnosis, what was she asking? She basically asked people the type of clothes, the utensils, the food and diet, the skin colour, gender, money, social class, the climate, the housing, all this information which could be checked historically. That's what she was after, hence the time periods. She asked them also, very interesting, about the death experience. She asked them to go through the death experience in their previous life, to ask them what it was like, what happened. She also asked them what happens in between lives and how is this current life chosen? And does anybody help you decide this particular life, and why this life? Why this time period? And what is your purpose in this life? So she really bombarded them with questions. And amazingly, because she hypnotically asked them to remember the answers, they all wrote down all the answers. She also asked them about the birth experience into this present life. When did you connect with the fetus? And she also asked, are people, this is a very interesting one, are people in the present life known to you from previous lives? It's quite an interesting question. So let's have a look at some of the answers. Now, I haven't got all the answers here because basically I've tried to condense down the 2 books. So basically I've just been looking at the main ones. So she had expected from fantasy that people would fantasize about more male lives and females, all being Napoleons or Hitler or Alexander the Great, etc. What did she find? Well, interestingly, what she found over the first, this is on the book, so this is basically the first 1,200 cases, and this was repeated for all the 6,000. But as you can see, it basically comes out at 50% male and 50% female. It's actually equal. The whole thing equals out. So there are no more males being remembered than females, which is very interesting. She also asked, you would expect if it was fantasy that you would get more upper class lives reported than lower class. What did she find? Well, interestingly, she found that the upper class lives that were being reported, and you can tell this from the information that people write down, she found that they were basically, the upper class were really only about 5% of the lives reported. Middle class were around about the sort of 20–30%, but the vast majority of people were reporting lower class lives where they're basically toiling in the fields or doing menial jobs. So the vast majority of people, as you would expect from historical data, would all be lower class. So she started to begin that, you know, there really is something in this. People are reporting stuff, what appear to be real lives. Population changes. Now, this is an interesting one. You would expect, well, let's put the graph up. Now, you remember this graph to the right here that I showed, where it starts off very low and then zooms up at the end. She found exactly the same things. People were reporting, obviously, lives in these time periods, but there were more lives reported in these more recent times than there were in past times. And it follows the very same pattern as what you see in the population changes. And although this is only the first 1,200 cases or so, she actually saw the same thing repeated over the whole 6,000. So let's go on to have a look at the death experience. Subjects were asked to recall their death. This is obviously when they died in their past life, what happened to them then. And she wanted to remember the feelings that they had, but without any associated pain. So what kind of answers did she get? Well, 85% had very positive experiences. And this is a typical experience. I'll read this out for you because it's quite important, actually. Now, this particular person says, dying was like being released. It was like going home again. It was as though a great burden had been lifted when I left my body and it floated up towards the light. I felt affection for the body I had occupied in this lifetime, but it was so good to be free. And that's so important. It was so good to be free. So death is a great release. And this is a pattern that she found repeated through every case. Now, you'll see the keen-eyed ones, if you could spot it, 85% of very positive experiences. So what would you think the 15% were? Well, essentially, the 15% that didn't have positive experiences experienced violent or sudden death. Now, I know a lot of you listen to this are probably mediums, so probably got quite a bit of experience of this kind of thing. So here's an example of a bloke. I'll read it out so that for those of you that aren't able to see it on the screen. Basically, this gentleman says, I was hit by a car while I was running across the street. I seemed to continue running across the street, and I wasn't really aware that I was dead. I felt very frustrated and lost because I didn't understand what was happening. Finally, I found myself in a place of darkness. And eventually, we don't know how long, but eventually they see a bright light. And when they see the bright light, they go soaring up through the darkness towards the light. So people who die violent or sudden death tend to hang around for a considerable period of time before they eventually go up to the light. Now, another example, which you probably guessed is coming, is a war experience. And this is a gentleman who was fighting, and then his body crumpled because obviously he'd been killed. But he kept on fighting, his spirit kept on fighting, but he couldn't seem to affect anything going on around him. He was still on the battlefield, but then he seemed to be joined by others who'd also died, and they were carrying on fighting in their spirit. They couldn't seem to leave that scene. Now, this particular gentleman, eventually, he did leave the scene after a significant period of time, and he did go to the light. But you can see how sudden or violent deaths can be such a shock to the system that people will tend to hang around in the earth plane for quite some period of time. And I know that some of you folks out there who are mediums have probably got involved in helping people and guiding them to the light. So if you're doing that, well done you. So here we go. Here's another death experience. Again, this is a person. I soared up high in the sky after I left my body. I didn't want to look back. I seemed to be surrounded by others who were congratulating me on that lifetime. I felt a sense of homecoming and great joy. There was life all around me. So when people die, they have this wonderful experience where they go up to the light and they meet people they know. they meet their guides, they have this great sense of homecoming and joy. So there's absolutely nothing to fear about death experience. Anyway, at this point, what I'd like to do is play a little recording. This is Dr. Helen Wambach. It's a recording, a radio interview she did back in 1979. So it's quite a while ago. And she's just talking about the death experience. So, Lawrence, if you're there, I don't know if this is going to play okay. Let's give it a go and see if it will. There we go. Over 1,400 people faced the death experience in her time. What is reported that there seems to be very low levels of
Yeah, that's not coming across at all well, sadly, David.
Oh, okay. It's not coming across.
No, sadly not. Did you just tick the little share audio box when you went into screen share?
Let me have this and just see if I can get it again. I'm not sure I did actually.
Yeah, if you stop your screen share and then restart it, but on the first screen, bottom left-hand corner, there's a little box that says share audio, and you need to tick the box.
Select Windows or screen. If I put entire screen, bit of decision. No, I can't see any box that says to be able to hear the sound. I can play it through the speaker on the PC and see if the microphone picks it up. Shall we try that?
Yep, give that a go, David.
Let me just see.
Just to let you know, we've lost your PowerPoint presentation at the moment. You need to reintroduce that.
Can you hear that now? Is that any better?
No.
No. Okay.
No. Sorry.
Okay. Maybe we'll abandon that one then.
Oh, okay.
I can always send a link to it. Okay. I'll just go back to the presentation. Back on here. Can you see the screen now?
Not at the moment. You haven't shared it. It's not come up on my screen. We'll be back shortly, ladies and gentlemen. We have a little interval.
Technology, eh? Okay, let's try again. Share screen.
This is where we sing, "Let's all go to the lobby."
Yeah, you sang a song, Lawrence. That would keep people. Okay, let me go back to the screen. Your browser has blocked your screen. Oh, okay, let me I think we had this problem before, didn't we? Let me just switch to another browser. I think. Okay, I'm just going to load it again.
Well, while we just got this short pause, ladies and gents, if anybody's got any questions and you want to start loading up the chat bar to the side, please feel free.
No, it's not letting me back in actually. Okay, let's try again. Check the screen icon on your address bar.
So, we're having a lovely evening here with David Pye. It was bound to happen sooner or later that we would have some technical issues. I found it thoroughly fascinating so far. Quick synopsis while we're waiting for David to rejoin us. Going back through the historical and all the other religion, including the Christianity side of the reincarnation debate. How interesting is that? Totally fascinating. I know reincarnation normally provokes quite a response from people. It's a very hotly debated topic. What does spirit? What do spirit do? Oh, hello. I love that sound.
Yeah,
Hello, you're back.
excellent, excellent. Okay, I'm going to share the screen again. Let's see if it'll do it again this time. Your entire screen, share. Okay, it's doing that thing again. Can you see it now?
Yeah, you need to maximise the central screen, David.
How's that? Is that back to the start again?
Yep.
Let me just flick through it.
So those of you joining us late, here's a quick chance to catch up on everything. Watch carefully, children.
There we go. We're nearly there. We're nearly there. Shall I try the broadcast again?
No, I think you.
Let's abandon it. Oh, okay,
yeah. I think you may need to bring that in a later life. Did you say something about you could post a link to it or something?
I can do, yes. Yeah, I can post a link to it.
Yeah, that'd probably be good.
Okay, let's right. Let's go on to the next phrase, which is choosing to be born. Because one of the questions that she asked people is, why did they choose this particular life? Basically, she asked the question: did anyone help with the choice? Were you reluctant to be born? Good question. The purpose of this lifetime. Oh, there we go. That's those three. Basically, here's an example. Basically, this person says, I chose to be born. Someone did help me choose, and it seemed to be some kind of voice that I trusted. The person was kind, helpful, and very wise. Feelings about the prospect of being born again were very positive. When you asked about the purpose of this lifetime, it flashed that I was to help broaden people's minds. And I chose to become a male this time, which is interesting. This person chose to become a male. So we have the choice of not only what life we live, but also whether we're going to be male or female. Then got another one here. This person chose to be born. A group of loved ones supported this person and encouraged this person to go through this coming lifetime. But the person wanted to stay back in spirit with the loved ones and not be born again. But eventually they were persuaded, and the person says, I knew that one of my purposes was to love, but I got no impression for why I had chosen this time period. I felt that I had always been female. I didn't really choose it. This is somebody who obviously incarnates a lot as a female. It just seemed the most natural thing. And another one, this is somebody who didn't want to be born again. My brother and some soul guardians seemed to be helping me. When you asked about the prospects of being born, I thought, oh, not again. But I also knew I had to learn more. And the purpose for this lifetime was to develop their psychic abilities and correct diet and health and their mental and emotional attitudes. Quite a bit on their plate, really. I chose this time period to re-experience life with my present family and friends. So this is a person that's being reincarnated back into the same family group, obviously different times apart. But they're being reincarnated with family and friends who they've known before and would also still be alive in this time. And she chose to be a woman to experience motherhood. So that's quite nice. The birth experience. This is a typical reply about being born, sensing the feelings of the mother, joining with the fetus. This is very interesting. This person says, I attached to the fetus when I decided to meet it in the womb of my mother just before birth. The feelings of my mother were very positive, loving, and warm. When you asked for the birth experience, I felt an odd tingling sensation around the fleshy ball that was me. My impression after birth was one of happiness, and the doctor seemed pleased, and my mother was very happy. I feel that this lifetime feels very good and positive, and a burst of energy. So this is somebody who's really keen on being born again. That's not for everyone, though. When you asked about the attachment to the fetus, I felt that I didn't really attach until my mother was in labor. The birth canal experience was interesting. I felt a fusion of my energy coalescing. So the fusion of their energy coalescing with the physical body. But they also felt anger at the loss of control as soon as they were born, because they're in this spirit energy, and suddenly they're being coalesced into this very small, tiny physical body. And it goes on to say, I was not really ready for the emotion of other people I was experiencing once I was born. Have we got another one? Oh, this is interesting. Relationships. The questions are, do you know anyone in this life from a past life? I'm sure a lot of people will have thoughts about this. What was your relationship to them in the past? Is there a purpose to your current relationship? Interesting question. As to why would you be born again with somebody you'd known from a past lifetime? What was the purpose of that? And what did we get? And this person says, I knew my mother in a past life when she was my sister, but I didn't know my father before, or my husband, but I did know my children from past lives. So quite an interesting mixture there of people that they knew very well and people that they didn't know. And another one here, I did know my mother from a past life, but my father seemed very vague. My husband I knew from a past life, but I didn't know my children. One friend came through as someone I'd known well in the past life. So they don't have to be relatives for people who you've known in past lives. They can be friends. I'm sure many of you listening here would probably have got friends who are far more friendly than perhaps some of your relatives. Quite an interesting one here. My mother had been my sister in a past life when we fought all the time. My father had been my grandfather in another lifetime. My husband was a Sioux Indian when I was a French padre, and I didn't like him then either. So this is clearly someone who has got a few issues to sort out in this particular lifetime. And she's obviously reincarnated again with the person that was a husband in the past life, and to try and get on well better, perhaps. Anyway, I'm just going to summarize the findings now of Helen Wambach, which is basically the research indicates that what was being reported did not appear to be fantasy because of the correlation with history. The research method was repeatable with different hypnotists and different groups, so she was able to farm out the method to other hypnotists. Some, I think, quite a bit went on, not so much in the UK, but in France and other parts of the world. And the research method was repeatable. We choose, or we're guided to choose, our present lives. So we have help. I mean, we choose them ourselves, but we're guided or helped by other people in the spirit realm to choose this present life. The birth experience is generally traumatic, and the majority of souls enter the fetus just before birth, which, if you remember, according to the Catholic Church, the soul is created at the moment of conception, but the evidence here shows that the souls actually enter the fetus just before birth. And there's also other experience to show that souls actually pop in and out of the fetus during the whole 9-month period to make sure that everything's okay. But they only actually can coalesce with the fetus just before birth. The other findings were we incarnate with people we have known from past lives. That's a very common theme. Now, we have had many past lives. Lots of us have had many past lives, some of which might appear quite dull and laborious. E.g., we know from Helen's research that the vast majority of people were born into lower caste lives. But you know, that's not a problem in the sense of just because a life may be dull and laborious in terms of the amount of work you've got to do. There's always relationships to work out and goals to be achieved in every lifetime. So there's plenty of lessons to be learned in any kind of life. And the most important thing, what I'd really like to take away from this, is that there's nothing to fear about death. When death occurs, it is a great release. It's a return to our true home and a reunion with all the people we know. There is no hell, basically. It's all heaven. We go back to a place of unconditional love. If you want to think of hell, then probably in comparison, here on earth is the best example of hell. But there's a little bit more on this later, actually, because you might say, yeah, hang on, what about all the people like Hitler and all the people who've done terrible things in their lives? Do they all go back as well? Well, we'll have a look at that in a moment. So basically, in conclusion, there does appear to be a mechanism and a grand plan for what happens on Earth, for all the life on Earth. And we incarnate here to learn, experience, and achieve certain objectives that will add to the greater knowledge of the universe. That's my conclusion, not anybody else's. I'm to blame for that. So what I was going to do now is, I think we've got a bit of time left, is just go on to Dr. Michael Newton. He basically, I think, he was around when Helen Wambach was around. Whether they knew each other, I can't actually find out, because he started his work in the late 80s into the 90s. And basically, Michael Newton did individual hypnotic regression, and he did over 5,000 cases during his career. And he waited until he got that many cases before he published his first book, which was Journey of Souls. And his interest, he wasn't interested in past lives particularly. He was focusing on the spirit realm. He wanted to know what happened in that period between lives. And he had very detailed conversations with individuals who've been regressed to the period in between lives. And he went on, because this was so successful, he went on to set up the Newton Institute to train other people to carry on the work that he was doing. And there are lots of people who are trained regressionists who take several years to become qualified, very well experienced people. And they can give people individual life before life, past life regressions, which is very interesting. So, what did Dr. Michael Newton find in his? This is like a potted summary, really, of what he found, because there's this book, Journey of Souls, and there's one called Destiny of Souls, which he published several years later. So basically, unfortunately, Michael Newton died a few years ago. So his first thing he found out about was leaving the body after death. He asked people about what happened, and very similar, almost identical to what Helen Wambach found. People head up towards the light, and generally, when they reach the light, they meet one or more of their guides, and they also meet people who the person has known or has known during that life, or even in previous lives. They meet up with all their friends again. And also, he describes if a soul has had a very tough life, then there is a soul healing process that goes on. There's also, what he also found is that suicides, Helen Wambach found this as well, is that suicide, when people commit suicide, immediately on death, they realize that they've made a mistake. Suicide, that there's no quick way out. Essentially, there's no checking out early. If you have incarnated to do certain tasks and you can't do them, and you check out early, basically you have to make up for it in some other way. So basically, quite often following discussions with your guides, etc., and with higher beings, you may well come back to repeat that life, or you may well say, oh, I'm never coming back again, because basically one thing that Michael Newton found is that people have total freedom of choice, that no one's forced you to go back down again, to lead another life. If you don't want to do it, basically you can just sit back and say, I've had enough. Or also you can even incarnate on another planet somewhere. It doesn't have to be the Earth. Another thing he found out. Now, rehabilitation of evildoers, yes, if people have gone very, very much astray in a life, then there is a rehabilitation process. It's almost like a solitary confinement, where they go through all the bad things that they've done, and they look at how they can possibly rehabilitation of that person. Souls aren't destroyed for being bad, but they certainly go through a lot of angst when they come back. So that's what you do, I think. Returning to our soul group, yeah. Basically, we're all part of soul groups, which Michael Newton reckons is, say, around about 24 people who are a soul group that we know very well, and we very often incarnate with those people over and over again, because we know them extremely well, and we discuss the lives with that soul group, and we support and help each other. You then go on to review your past life with a council of elders. This is a sort of higher beings who are very benevolent towards you, and they go through what you did right and what you did wrong, and where you could make it better. But don't think of it as being like a school or a classroom. It's basically, it's all unconditional love. It's all sort of a wonderful experience, and there's nothing to get stressed about. And you basically, you look at your past life and other lives with your soul group. You all share your experiences. And of course, while you're in spirit, you still spend some time learning. You can also spend a lot of time having fun. Michael Newton classed people into beginner, intermediate, and advanced souls. So advanced souls are people who've been incarnated many, many times. And beginners, obviously, have only incarnated a few times. And he divided people up into that based on the experiences that they reported. He also mentions about the role of guides, who are basically people like us who serve many, many incarnations and get to a point where we can help other people in their lives. So people like us become guides in the future. As I said before, we found there was no pressure to take on a new life. There were lots of discussion with guides council regarding your next life. And also you could review all your next life options. And also you go through a preparation about your next life and learning to recognize key moments in people. That's very interesting, actually, because it gives an example, I think. I mean, you might say to yourself, well, I've got all these lessons to learn. I've got all this stuff I want to do in this life. But of course, you arrive here with complete amnesia. You don't know what the hell you're supposed to be doing. But what happens is, in the preparation process, you are given clues. These are like synchronistic events. These are like that feeling that you're drawn to a certain person or drawn to a certain place. These are things that we as individuals need to look at and need to study. And one very simple example that he gives in the book, I think, is of a chap that was told, a woman that was going to be very important in his life. He said she would arrive on a bike with a white dress and she'd be wearing a silver pendant. And that's the kind of thing. And that's an event, if you weren't paying attention, that could well pass you by. But what happens is when you recognize somebody in this life who has some kind of deja vu or some kind of memory that's triggered, then that same thing will be happening to that person as well. So this connection will be formed. And these are the things that allow you to link up with other people. I'm not saying it's going to be marriage or anything. It just may be a person that's important in your life for a short period of time. But essentially, that there are certain points in your life and certain signs to look for where somebody might help you for a period of time or guide you in a certain direction. So we need to be open to these experiences. So I'm coming to the end now. Basically, I've done a nice little picture of people dying and then being reborn again. What Michael Newton studied was the bit in between. That's what he was really interested in. So in conclusion, Michael Newton says, the spirit realm is absolutely vast, humongously vast, with soul groups, guides, teachers, and masters. Souls are telepathic. Obviously, they don't talk to each other, and they through voices, and they create their surroundings. So I think those of your mediums will know that people in the spirit world can actually create their own surroundings. They can be living in the house, what looked like the house they lived in when they were on Earth, and if they can rearrange the furniture and rearrange the doors and windows, etc. So you can have this ability to create your surroundings, and you can talk to each other telepathically. Young souls form the majority on Earth. That's what he discovered. So which you'd expect that, because when you look at the population, there's such a vast increase of people being born on the Earth at the moment, but they can't all be advanced souls. Souls can partially incarnate. This is very interesting. Basically, what he found is that when a soul incarnates, part of their energy incarnates, but part of the energy stays behind in spirit. And the percentage, you might be 70% incarnates in a body on the Earth, but you've got 30% left in spirit, which is quite an interesting idea, isn't it? That you can split your soul can split its energy. Returning souls are cleansed and healed. Learning carries on in the spirit realm, governed by love and respect, with opportunity for fun and recreation. Souls leading a life of evil are rehabilitated or undergo karmic retribution in future lives. So there you go, no escape. New lives are considered in detail and in consultation with your guides and soul groups who may or may not incarnate with us. Okay, so there you go. That's basically it. I do have a website, which is reincarnation.me.uk, where I've got more information on it, and I can put links on there to Helen Wambach and other sources. That's it. Shall I stop sharing, Lawrence? Okay. I'll Are you there, Lawrence? Yes. Oh, I can't hear you for some reason. Can you hear me?
No, that's because I had my mic muted.
That's great. Okay. I thought maybe I've been talking for the last 20 minutes and nobody could hear me.
Yeah.
No.
Try again. That was brilliant. Really, really good. A lot of positive comments coming in on the site. Would you mind just a couple of questions, please, David?
Sure, yeah. I can't see them actually. Are they? Oh, yes, I can now. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay, I've got them here.
Well, there's one up there from Dean Phillips up on screen now. And
oh, yes.
Are there some souls that is their first time on the Earth plane?
Apparently, there will be. I think, as I said before, if you look at the population changes, where we got this massive increase in population heading towards over 7 billion, according to Michael Newton, there are some very young souls. Basically, from other reports, souls are queuing up to come down to Earth. There's a huge interest in this current time. If you think of what happened from the Second World War onwards, there's been absolutely massive change in planet Earth. There's obviously all the climate change, but there's also a massive increase in technological advances. It is, from a point of view of incarnating, it would be a very, very exciting time to incarnate. Not if you end up in some African country and you die of malnutrition at the age of 10, obviously, because I'm talking about the West here, but obviously of those 7 billion souls, a lot of people will be incarnating in some very impoverished and some very sad lives. So there's a whole mixture of people.
Interesting. I think there's 7 billion souls here may disagree with that statement just at this precise time. Where was he? Jamie Williamson. There we go.
Oh, yes. Good question, Jamie. Yeah, from a scientific point of view. Essentially, she advertised, her work started in California. And basically, she advertised through posters for people to come along, pay their $20 or whatever, and spend a whole day being regressed. So the subjects, you could say, were random in the fact that she didn't know who she was going to get. But then you might say, oh, well, you've probably got people who were interested in the topic to begin with. I mean, she says that she got quite a mixture of people. So I suppose that there will be some people who believed in reincarnation, who they'd probably bring along people who didn't believe in reincarnation. So there would be a mixture, but there probably is a degree of bias there.
Right. There we go. Luann.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Basically, yes. I mean, well, obviously, I don't know because I've not tried it. But from what I've read from Michael Newton and also from Helen Wambach, if somebody does commit suicide, they do go back to the same place. They do go back to the spirit world of unconditional love, where basically people say, "Oh, well, you shouldn't really have done that, but there you go. We know it's been a tough time." So people will be looked on sympathetically, and people who die by accidents, of course, under any conditions at all, will go back to spirit. But of course, as mediums will probably tell you, some people who die by accident, unexpectedly, may spend some time hovering around the earth planes for quite some time before they eventually go to the light, especially if they died in war or in a nasty car accident or some other natural catastrophe. but everybody goes back to the same place.
I'm sure that that's a great comfort to a lot of people, because we've got the old doctrines of suicides and even denied a proper burial going back in history. So, yeah,
Yes.
lovely. Our very mutual and wonderful friend, Sue Townsend.
So, oh, my own past lives. Yes, I have actually. I have had a past life regression. Essentially, what I discovered is that before I was born, I spent a lot of time in spirit, going back into into the fetus in my mother's body. I spent a lot of time going back and forwards, checking that everything was okay, checking that my mother was happy, checking that my mother really wanted me, which fortunately she did. And I only actually entered the fetus at the very last minute. That's what I found out when I did one of my past life regressions. On a previous one, I've been told, I've not actually experienced this myself, but I've been told by two separate sources that I was in the First World War. I was in America in the First World War, and I joined up when I was 17, and I was shot and injured and invalided out, and spent the rest of my time as a newspaper reporter. Died in a car crash around about 1920. So, I mean, I've not actually experienced that past life regression myself. I've not actually been able to go back and do it, but that's what I've been told. So I'll probably try again, actually. But to be honest, I'm not too bothered about what my own past lives were. I was more fascinated by the period in between lives. That's the really interesting bit. And also promoting Helen Wambach and just getting people to know that there's nothing to fear about death. That is the most wonderful thing that comes out of these studies, is that death is a great release. It's a wonderful experience to go back and leave the physical body. I'm not advocating death, but I'm just saying that when it happens, it's a lovely experience. So that should be very reassuring to people.
Yes, I did pick up on that thread, and yeah, that is a great comfort. Probably not applied to ourselves, because we're human. You know, we've all. I think the nicest way of saying is, I'm not frightened of going to spirit. It's the manner in which I go causes me concern.
You mean great pain? You mean in terms of having a slow death, or just?
Yeah, people say they're not scared of death. It's just
Yeah.
how that manifests itself. That's sometimes what we get a little bit more concerned with.
Yes, if you have a long lingering death, clearly it's rather unpleasant. So there is that to remember. But you know, hang on in there till the end, and all will be good.
That's an interesting comment, and
Oh,
also
right.
it's a nice little tie in there as well, because the meditation that I took this morning online was about connecting with your higher self back in spirit. And when you said that, I thought, oh, there we go, we're doing that today. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it does tie in, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, it does seem from Michael Newton's work that only part of us incarnates, and the rest of it is to learn. And he also mentions on some of the cases that when people go back, when people die and go back to spirit, and they meet up with the soul groups, that they know straight away who's in and who's out, because they can feel the energy of the person, but they know it's incomplete because that person is living a life on Earth, but they can still communicate with them. So the soul energy is split between being in spirit, where it's not at its full potential, but it's at its full potential down on Earth, because the right amount of energy. And it's basically, it seems to be around the fact, if you have a strong physical body, you may well have more energy to incarnate within that body. You know, you may become more athletic, or maybe that's why some athletes do so well, because they've got a lot of soul energy in them, whereas other people with weaker bodies maybe have less energy. I'm just surmising that. I don't know for sure, but it may be that there's a distribution like that based on the state of the physical body you incarnate in.
very interesting. Time for one last question, just come in from lovely Paula.
It's a really interesting question, is it, about dementia? I don't really know the answer to this. You can certainly imagine that part of them would be in the spirit world. You wonder whether they're moving in and out, but I wouldn't actually know. I've not really. That's something I've looked into, but it'd be certainly interesting to find out about it. Whether people in dementia or anybody in, we know in a coma that the spirit has left the body, and the body is I don't know if you've heard of Evan Alexander. He was a neurosurgeon. Just very briefly, he's a neurosurgeon who obviously did lots of brain work, and he was very much a scientist. Didn't believe in anything at all, to do any mumbo jumbo. But what happened is he had a nasty case of E. coli meningitis, which basically knocked him into a coma, and it started eating away at his brain. So as far as the physicians were concerned, he was brain dead, and basically he'd been out for several weeks. But what happened is he woke up from it, and he had a massive near-death experience where he'd been in the spirit world all that time, meeting up with people, and basically he's now written several books on the topic, and he's running courses because he's completely changed man. That this experience changed his whole life. So while he was in this coma, his soul, if you like, was away in the spirit world, meeting up with lots of other people and learning lots of interesting things. So maybe people with dementia are popping in and out. I don't know. Good question.
It is, and just a little nugget from me personally, in my experience. I had a communication during a service for a lady, described this gentleman. She could take this gentleman, gave the evidential side, she could take that. But I could tell by the look on her face a puzzlement. And I said, why are you not accepting this person? She said, they're here. I'm going to see him today. And I went, hang on. And I came back and I actually got the guy's name straight off. And she said, well, that's him. She said, but he's still alive. I'm going to see him. He's got dementia. I thought, wow, how interesting. My job is to work with spirit.
Yeah.
I didn't put the caveat in there, spirit of people who are no longer here on earth. I just said, I will work with spirit. So, yeah, I find that a great source of comfort or potential comfort for those that see people with that dementia aspects, that the body is going through that, but the real you, the real essence, the soul, is free of that.
Yes. Yeah.
David, what a fantastic evening. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. That's a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Very quick run through what's coming up this week. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, we have Rosemary Spencer taking our service live within the church, and that will also be broadcast live on the Facebook page. Then on Monday evening at 7 o'clock, we have a meditation. Wednesday, 3 o'clock, we have another live service being broadcast from the church. And don't forget, you can come to these services in the church. And this Wednesday, we have Alan Jeff Potts. On Friday night, we've got an extra. We've snuck in a quickie here. We've got an evening with Diana Coldman, and she'll be talking about shamanic wisdom and drum healing. And then very hotly on the heels of that, on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, we're joined live by Steve Richards from Australia. And it's very difficult to describe what he's going to talk about, but it does link in very closely with the shamanic side of Diana Coldman's the night before. It just feels like these energies really belong together. So I know there is going to be the element of the Aboriginal dream time from Steve, but also he expands out onto different levels of consciousness. So yeah, a really out there weekend. So David, just remains to be said again, thank you so much. We are so fortunate, the wonderful people that give up your time, come in and talk to us. We really, really do appreciate it. Lovely seeing all you people on the side there with your positive comments. I really hope that you're getting a lot out of the Saturday nights, which I'm now calling the educational nights. All different things coming in, just to learn, find out more. If you can go along with it, great. If you don't go along with it, great. At least you're there trying. So thank you all for joining. Good
Yeah.
night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.